So some close friends of ours were sitting around, having dinner and enjoying the great, yeah, I said that, and discussing some images of the day. At one point, the debate became so intense that they were discussing, what the government was doing in people's lives and da-da-da-da-da. You've all been a part of these conversations, right? Then they shifted to the age-old debate around male-female relationships, right? And men oughta and women oughta, and those sentences that begin like that, right? Am I in the right house? Yeah, we've all been there. I found myself getting quiet, and I heard the words in the conversation coming up. These three words kept coming up. The problem is, da-da-da-da-da. They would launch into another conversation. And then a few minutes later, somebody else would say, well, no, the real problem is, excuse me. And then it came up again. The problem is, this just kept being said a little too much. And I remember that night making a conscious decision that I did not want to partake in any other conversations that solely focused on the problems. Because all of us can list the problems. We do it at the dinner table, we do it when we go out to lunch with each other, we do it over the water coolers, we do it with, and the sentence began like this, child. When the sentence begins with child, a problem is following that. So we know our problems. We've talked about the problem ad nauseum. We know them. Amen? I decided that I wanted to be included in conversations that focused on solutions from that point forward. So our theme today is a command to movement. That means after we have defined the problems all day and all night, the real question is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to solve the problem? If we're going to be the change, what does that look like? What will it take? I taught a word shop, and I said that right, because that's what we call them in my women's ministry, word shops. I taught a word shop at my annual women's ministry last year, and I placed 4 items in the middle of the tables, much like these tables. I put white paper there, I put scissors there, Scotch tape, and some colored markers. Most of the women there were just like the women in this room, smart, gifted, talented, creative with visions for their future, beautiful, eager, enthusiastic. Most of them, however, were stuck on what they were going to do with all of that God-given stuff. Anybody in the house? So these items were sitting there in the middle of the table, and I moved on doing my teaching and talking and whatever. And, you could see a few women saying, bunch of stuff on the table, kind of like today, bunch of stuff on the table. What are we going to do with this stuff? So we finally got around to time to deal with what I put on the table. And I gave them their instructions. The instruction was very simple. The instruction said you have 30 minutes to make something. And then I left the room. Walked around, came into the back door, and just sat down. So for the first 5 minutes, about 90% of the women in the room, much like this room today, they looked at the supplies. They looked at each other. A few of them had seen me come in the back door and mark, and so they started looking at me in the back like, you got anything else you want to tell me? And I just smiled at them real pretty, from this side to my best side. And so a few of the women grabbed the supplies and started working, and then shortly thereafter everybody in the room was working, feverishly working and figuring out what they were going to do with this white paper, these markers, the Scotch tape, and these scissors. When time was called, they stood up and they shared everything from paper baskets with handles filled with heart-shaped little pieces of paper with words of encouragement for everybody in the room. Another lady made a paper alligator. Another lady made a paper teacup and saucer. Another lady made a paper building complete with windows and doors that represented her vision for what she wanted to do for timed out foster care kids. Another one created, do you hear what's happening here? And so they were absolutely excited about standing up and talking about these ingenious things that they had created with white paper, Scotch tape, magic markers, and scissors. I said, look what you were able to do with white paper, Scotch tape, magic markers, and scissors. Look how fabulously creative and amazing you are. Instantly, women started to get it. Some screamed, some laughed out loud with a nervous laughter. Several began to cry because everybody was guilty of thinking, I need resources, I need help, I need this, I need that, before I can take a step and move out and do something or be something that matters. And they left there understanding very powerfully that all it took was for them to take a step to be it. And you can create something from almost nothing. So here's the deal. Some of these same women are returning to this year's retreat. It's scheduled for next month. They can't wait to get there because we've got a section of the opening dinner called Praise Reports, right? They're coming back. One sister's coming back to report the fact that that one that did the building, she's incorporated her ministry. She's done a fundraiser. The application is going next week to the IRS for the 501c3. She's got a strategic plan. She's got an implementation plan. And she's off and running. Another sister is coming back to report that she's going to give a talk on mental health for women. She sat in our retreats for 3 years and barely spoke because she was concerned about the fact that her accent was too thick, and she's getting ready to be a presenter this year. Because she realized that out of white paper, Scotch tape, scissors, and markers, that she could actually be something different than what she had been. Still another sister made a decision to relocate to New York because she always had dreams of being on Broadway. She's a registered nurse, so she got a job just like that. She's relocated, she's moved, she's getting ready to start acting classes. Her church opened up a branch in New York at the same time she moved. She won a slot on the Creative Arts Ministry, just rocking and rolling. She can't wait to get to Orlando next month to say, hey, I did it. Okay? What I'm saying here is sometimes we get convinced that doing more requires the sun and the moon to shift, when all it really takes is for you to honor this command to make a move. And I promise you, the universe will open its doors and all that you need will come flooding in if you just make the first move. So this theme is a call to action, a command to move, but finally, it is also a charge to make something different happen. It is said the definition of insanity is what? There you go. I knew I was in a smart room. I like hanging out with intelligent people. If this is true, then far too many of us are suffering from insanity. Because our lives are such a routine, aren't they? We essentially get up at the same time. We kind of go through the same routines in the morning. We kind of drive the same way to work every day unless there's an accident. And then we figure out an alternative route. You know, we're coming, Mark and I were coming today, and I said to him, I'm in a place in my life right now, Mark, where I just don't want to miss any of God's glory. Not one drop of God's glory. I said, look at the trees, Mark. Look how many different colors of green there are, Mark. Just coming up the driveway, the freeway. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You know, I just... Come on, right? Help me. Pray for me, Lana. We cook the same meals every week. You know, routine, right? Because it's comfortable. We just kind of do what we do, right? Can we just break it down here and say most people don't like change? Yes. Can we tell the truth about that? And Lana has the nerve to call you in here today to tell you change. Thought this was supposed to be fun today. When things are changed, it seems to cause dread, frustration, fear, and all sorts of negative emotions. There are rare, precious few people like us who thrive off change. How many of you thrive off change? Yeah, look at there. See, that's just about 4, 5, 6 of us. And the world looks at us and think we are stark, raving crazy some days. Because we're looking for another way, a different way. Let's try this, let's try that. We're the ones with that adventurous spirit. And other people look at us going, well, you just relax. Calm down. But here's the funny thing about that. The comfort zone has formed itself to our bodies. See, those of us who don't like change have slipped into what's known as the comfort zone. And just like an old lazy boy chair, our butt print is in the comfort zone. It represents the familiar. And we don't have to think outside the comfort zone. I tell people all the time, I just moved to Atlanta a few months ago, and some friends invited me to dinner in the neighborhood, and they said, we'll come pick you up. I said, no, give me the address. I'll put it in my GPS, because I want the experience of kind of finding where I'm going, So I got there, and everybody was enjoying the grape and all of that. Y'all know what I mean about the grape, right? See, I do, y'all do. So somebody looked at me and said, well, would you like a glass of wine? I said, oh, no, thank you. And somebody whispered, she's a minister. I said, child, that's all right. I'd have a glass of wine if my car knew how to get me home. Because I'm not your grandmama's preacher. If I were home in Florida, having that glass of wine would have been okay because my car knows how to get me home there. You know what I mean? Yet, here it is. Change is happening all around us whether we cooperate with it or not. This is the dichotomy of the concept. If I put something in your face and say change, your first reaction would be like, no, right? But change is happening whether we cooperate with it or not. We just came out of the winter season, right? Okay? In the winter season, the trees were all bare. Change. The temperatures dropped, and they stayed cold for a while, right? Could you have worn the clothes today, 3 months ago? Yeah, you changed. You changed into your winter wardrobe, and you did it without thinking. The temperature dropped, you reached for your coat by reflex. So you see, we do cooperate with change, whether we know it or not, whether we're paying attention to it or not. The critters all went into hibernation, and we changed. You don't look like or act like or communicate like you did when you were born. When you first came here and you wanted attention, in those first 6 months, what did you do? Cry. That's right. Now you want attention, what do you do? What you do with your hand on your hip now? Some of us are not the same size we were a few years ago. And we realized that favorite skirt that we used to love simply was not going to close around our waist anymore. So we just eased on over to the mall and we bought us a skirt in a new size. See, we changed. We changed. How many of you are over 50 years old in the room? These my sisters right here. I don't even have to list the changes that are very real in our body and in our world, you know. And I look at these little sisters sashaying around here, the girls, the shoes I voted for today, and these platforms with these 6-inch, because I'm a shoe girl, right? And that sister came walking across the carpet. I said, where the voting ticket? Because those are the shoes I'm voting for right there. And I said, ooh, I leaned over to Sister Thornton. I said, I remember the day. Change. Because I can't wear them anymore, but they're sharp. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yet, these are subtle changes that almost happen without us noticing them. But when we are charged with intentional change, we want to resist. Sisters, we must be intentional with change, both individually and corporately. Because if we are not engaged, things simply happen that we don't want to see. I told you I got here from Atlanta. I moved there a few months ago. Just last week, the governor signed a law that allows guns in churches and schools and other public venues. And I woke up and said, where do I live? Because some change had taken place that I did not engage in to try and stop. There is no excuse that I was new to the city. There's no excuse that I didn't know anybody there. One of the first things I should have done, and I'm telling you, this came flooding into my spirit. One of the first things I should have done when I arrived in the city was go register to vote. How did I drop that ball? How did I do that? And I did not point my finger at these crazy people down at the Capitol first. The first thought I thought about was, I did not engage in this process. Now, I don't know if I could have made a difference all by myself, but how many of me are walking around that city, that state, that allowed these people to pass a law that allows a gun to come to church with me? Now that's the bad news about what happens when we don't engage in change. Amen? Amen. Now here's an example of some of the good news as I close. Everybody almost just heard of a man named Steve Jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Steve Jobs broke the business model because most successful business people find a need that is not being addressed, and they create whatever needs to be created to address the need, right? This man blew that up. He created something fun and exciting that nobody needed initially.